Hokkaido, Japan. Snow still covers the ground. Most fruit trees are still weeks from showing any sign of life, still locked in the silence of winter. But the villagers are already filling wooden baskets, deep blueberries, hanging from small shrubs that didn't just survive the winter, they ripened through it. This plant never asked for a greenhouse. It never needed frost cloth or careful coddling. While blueberry growers further south were still watching weather forecasts and worrying about their last frost date, these shrubs were already producing fruit, ahead of strawberries, ahead of almost every other berry on Earth, and in a landscape that would freeze most crops solid. For decades, this berry existed quietly in the frozen corners of northern Asia and Siberia, studied intensively by Soviet horticulturists who needed crops capable of feeding populations in climates that killed everything else. The genetics stayed locked behind the Iron Curtain. The Western world simply never looked for it. Then researchers finally examined the data, the cold tolerance numbers, the yield records from experimental orchards, the nutritional profiles pulled from mass spectrometry analysis. Researchers studying fruit crops in northern climates kept running into the same strange data point. A berry that ripened weeks before strawberries, survived temperatures that killed blueberries, and carried nearly triple the antioxidant load. But outside of a few remote research stations, almost nobody in the Western world had ever heard of it. That plant is called the honeyberry. And once you understand what this plant actually does, you'll understand exactly why modern agriculture walked right past it. What happens when a fruit evolves in a climate that kills almost everything else? To answer that, you have to start where the honeyberry came from, because this plant did not evolve in mild conditions. It was shaped by punishment. The boreal forests of northern Japan, Russia, and Siberia are not forgiving environments. Winters in these regions can push temperatures to -40 degrees Fahrenheit and beyond. The ground freezes hard. Snowfall is measured in feet, not inches. Most plants that grow fruit simply cannot survive these conditions long enough to reproduce. The honeyberry evolved a different strategy. While other flowering plants time their blooms for the safe warmth of late spring, the honeyberry blooms early, aggressively early, when late frosts are still a genuine threat. And here is the part that seems biologically improbable. Its open blossoms can withstand temperatures as low as 19 degrees Fahrenheit without damage. The wood itself survives -53 degrees Fahrenheit. It is not merely cold tolerant, it is cold adapted, a plant designed by thousands of years of natural selection to operate in conditions that would kill its competitors. And that extreme cold tolerance leads to an advantage most fruit growers never think about. Imagine an orchard in early May. The ground still holds patches of snow. The apple trees are bare. The strawberry fields are silent. And in the middle of that frozen landscape, honeyberry bushes are already heavy with fruit. That early harvest window is one of the most underappreciated advantages in cold climate horticulture. A mature honeyberry bush can already be producing bowls of ripe berries in late May, filling what growers call the hunger gap, that quiet stretch between the last preserved harvest of the previous year and the first fresh fruit of the new season. Late spring frosts, the event that ruins fruit harvests year after year for growers across the northern United States, Canada, and northern Europe, are simply not a threat. The honeyberry already accounted for them. It evolved past them. The indigenous Ainu people of Hokkaido understood this long before any university study existed. They called the honeyberry haskapu, a name that translates roughly to the berry of long life and many blessings. For the Ainu, the berry marked the beginning of the short northern summer. After months of preserved food and frozen landscapes, the first honeyberries were a signal that life was returning to the land. It was woven into seasonal ritual, traditional medicine, and the daily diet of a people who lived in genuine hardship, a quiet anchor between the cold and the warmth. They noticed what the data would later confirm, that people who ate this berry regularly seemed to carry a particular kind of vitality into old age. They didn't have mass spectrometry. They had generations of careful observation. But the people who first studied this berry seriously were not traditional gardeners. They were scientists working under a very different kind of pressure. During the 20th century, Soviet horticulture operated under a specific pressure that Western agriculture never faced. The government needed crops that could produce meaningful nutrition in regions where citrus trees would freeze on arrival. Vitamin C deficiency, scurvy, was a genuine public health concern in the far northern Soviet territories. Scientists from the Vavilov Institute of Plant Industry, and later from research stations scattered across Siberia, began systematically collecting and cataloging wild Lonicera caerulea specimens from the Kamchatka Peninsula. They were breeding deliberately, selecting for hardiness, yield, and nutritional density simultaneously. Not for shelf life, not for visual appeal, for survival value. This work continued in relative obscurity for decades. When the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, those genetics, years of carefully selected breeding lines, began slowly moving westward. It was Dr. Bob Boers at the University of Saskatchewan who would transform that raw genetic material into what we now know as the modern honeyberry. Through meticulous crossing of the cold, hardy Russian varieties with the sweeter, more palatable Japanese cultivars, Boers produced something genuinely new. A berry with the structural toughness of its Siberian ancestors and the flavor complexity that made it worth eating beyond survival necessity. The result won awards, it attracted academic attention, and it remained almost completely absent from commercial agriculture. Then researchers ran the nutritional analysis. And this is where the story gets strange. A standard blueberry contains roughly 160 to 200 milligrams of anthocyanins per 100 grams, the pigment compounds associated with antioxidant activity and cellular protection. The honeyberry, depending on cultivar, delivers between 400 and 1,500 milligrams per 100 grams. That is not a marginal difference. That is a category difference. Slice open a blueberry, the skin is dark blue, but the inside is pale and translucent. The anthocyanins are concentrated at the surface, barely skin deep. Now cut open a honeyberry. The entire fruit is deep crimson, like ink soaking through paper, saturated all the way through with the same compounds that make dark berries nutritionally significant. A small half-cup serving of honeyberries delivers more vitamin C than 3 oranges, 186 milligrams per 100 grams, compared to an orange's 53. Without the concentrated fructose load that comes with most high vitamin C fruits, the numbers from the University of Saskatchewan and Dalhousie University are consistent. This is not a marginal superfood upgrade. This is a genuinely different nutritional density, grown in a climate where most high-nutrient fruits cannot even survive. So if this berry grows earlier, survives harsher climates, and contains more nutrients than blueberries, why isn't it in every grocery store? The answer is not nutritional, it is logistical. Somewhere in a supply chain meeting room, the decision was simple. A fruit that cannot survive shipping cannot survive the market. The honeyberry's greatest asset from a flavor standpoint, its extraordinarily thin, delicate skin, is its fatal flaw from a shipping standpoint. Where a blueberry's thick, waxy cuticle allows it to be mechanically harvested, tumbled into bins, loaded onto refrigerated trucks, and arrive 3 days later looking perfect, the honeyberry begins releasing juice almost immediately after picking. Fill a deep container, and the weight of the upper layers crushes those below. Refrigerate and ship for 3 days, and you don't arrive with fruit. You arrive with stained packaging and a loss. Commercial agriculture made a simple calculation. A fruit that cannot survive the supply chain is commercially unviable, regardless of what it contains. That decision, made by accountants rather than agronomists, is why most people in the Western world have never tasted a honeyberry. Not because the plant failed, because the plant refused to cooperate with industrial distribution. For home growers, that refusal is an opportunity. The honeyberry is among the most forgiving fruit shrubs available to a cold climate gardener. Where blueberries require highly acidic soil, pH between 4.5 and 5.5, and will slowly starve in neutral garden ground. Honeyberries thrive in a pH range of 5.0 to 8.0. They grow in clay. They grow in sandy loam. They grow in the ordinary, imperfect soil of a backyard without amendment, without annual sulfur applications, without the constant soil management a blueberry demands. Plant them in USDA zones 2 through 7. Mulch them well. Give them full sun or light afternoon shade. Deer tend to avoid the fuzzy leaves. Pests rarely reach the fruit because it ripens before most insect populations have fully emerged for the season. One critical note: honeyberries are not self-fertile. You need at least 2 different varieties that bloom at the same time for cross-pollination to occur. Plant Aurora alongside Borealis. Pair the beast with the beauty. Without that partnership, you'll get flowers and no fruit. And buy plants, not seeds. Honeyberries do not grow true from seed. A seed-grown bush may take years to fruit and will not carry the sweetness of the cultivated varieties. Look for dormant plugs or established plants from reputable nurseries that carry the University of Saskatchewan lines: Aurora, Borealis, Indigo Gem, Tundra. Vendors like Honeyberry USA and One Green World stock verified genetics. A healthy honeyberry bush, properly sited, can continue producing fruit for 40 to 50 years. That number is worth pausing on. One planting, one decision, and potentially half a century of early season fruit from a shrub that requires almost no intervention to maintain. The Ainu understood it through generations of lived experience. Soviet scientists understood it through the pressures of survival agriculture. Modern researchers are beginning to understand it through controlled study. What all of them found, approaching from completely different directions, was the same plant, doing the same remarkable thing: producing food where most crops cannot, producing it earlier than almost anything else, and doing it year after year for the span of an entire human lifetime. The honeyberry was never lost. It was simply growing quietly in the cold, waiting for the rest of the world to notice. For more forgotten crops, resilient plants, and the growing knowledge that modern agriculture left behind, subscribe to Nature Unearthed. The land still remembers what we forgot.